in doing forward bends in the beginning, we mostly work with standing poses. Those are very safe for the back, much more forgiving for the beginner. You can do them in a seated position, but it becomes very specific. So as you continue to develop with yoga, you might want to use this procedure. And the procedure is, first have cushioning underneath the heel. It's important to know that any kind of bone pain in any yoga pose is unacceptable. It's not a proper thing to follow. So if you have bone pain of any kind, talk to your instructor, get out of the pose, find a different way of working. Bone pain is never good. So having cushioning underneath the heel is one way to prevent having any kind of pain or inflammation. Or there are other problems that can be created in the heel simply from bone pain, so don't let this hurt. If I go into this forward bend and I allow my knee to press into the underarm and the heel of my palm to cover the heel of my foot, as long as the knee pushes into the underarm and the underarm presses onto the knee, then very little likelihood of any injury to the hamstring or any injury to the back. It's a very safe procedure because your rib cage is touching the thigh. Now I've have individuals who are very flexible who also use this procedure. If you have very flexible legs and your knee can easily straighten, then what I usually do is put a block underneath the heel. In this position, as I'm holding, again, knee touches underarm, underarm presses on knee. If you have a ballerina who can get her knee all the way down, it's important for her to press her knee into the underarm, even if she doesn't have to. And the reason for that is it strengthens the back of the knee. You can, in ballet, if you overstretch the back of your knee, you're more likely to get an ACL tear. So to prevent that, knee pushes into underarm, underarm onto knee. As I'm in this position and I'm stretching over, coming sideways, my hand is pulling strongly at the heel. The knee is pushing into the underarm. And what will happen over a period of time? My right arm, in this case, right arm, right side back, will gradually fatigue, and the knee will go from being bent to being straight. If the heel of my palm is at the heel of my foot, then the right side of my back has to become much more flexible. It will slowly fatigue and lengthen. The right arm becomes very strong. And what happens? It becomes strong from the base of the palm, coming up, of course, into the bicep. But if I'm very strong from base of my palm up, you find the strength here will help you in handstands, so you're less likely to have wrist problems as a result. So it's helpful with wrist problems as a means of decompressing wrists. So for this position, I'm stretching over. Another way to work in this position is just to take the left arm off to the left. Again, knee is always pressing on underarm, underarm on knee. If you're not quite so flexible, you can put some cushioning underneath your foot and just work with your knee bent as you're in this position, arm out to the side. The idea is keep abdomen long, keep your spine in a nice, long, neutral position. As you continue with your forward bend, developing in this style, the next thing that you would do is take the right arm to the inside of the knee. I still want my shoulder as close to the foot as possible. So I don't want my knee way back here. Here's my knee here. I want to make sure that my shoulder is, if possible, in front of the knee. You work toward taking elbow toward the floor. And if you're going to touch your hand anywhere, just touch your thumb. In the beginning, that's enough. How do I twist into this pose? What creates the twist? Bottom tip of shoulder blade, remember serratus anterior, bottom tip of shoulder blade shifting to the left. And that allows me to easily take my hand onto the foot. So if I'm in this position, that would be another way to work. If I only work hand catching the heel, right arm to right leg, it's going to loosen up my right shoulder. It's going to loosen the right side of my back. So when I do the next variation, left leg out, next variation on that pose would be taking right arm to the outside of the left foot. And the same thing occurs. Elbow crosses over. If it's difficult to cross over, you can bend your knee a little bit. And what are you trying to do? You're trying to get the elbow as close to the floor as possible. Once the elbow reaches the floor, elbow continues to move to the left. Elbow continues to move forward. And if you do all of that, eventually the thumb or hand can come onto the foot. But catching the foot and pushing elbow down will just stress your shoulder. So the idea is develop strength in serratus, develop strength in posterior deltoid so you can twist a little more effectively. Get the elbow to go down, get the elbow to go to the left and forward, and the hand will show up at the foot. Hand on the foot is meaningless if you just stress the shoulder. So that's the next level of working that particular pose. This can develop much farther. You can go into much deeper yoga poses from doing this. And you find that as you go into these other poses, in order to start twisting into the poses, I can no longer leave my right knee here. So let's give you an example of a deeper yoga pose once you've developed this for a little while. And I'll just go briefly into it. I'll go all the way. If I'm in this kind of seated position, what do I always want to do? I always want to move knee and the opposite foot apart from one another. You want to create the greatest length that you can from one foot to the opposing knee. So if I'm in this kind of posture, I want to reach foot away from knee. So as I come into the pose, you'll notice that my shoulder is down by my knee. I only have to use the thumb, or I can use the opposite hand. That will get me into that twist. If I continue to twist more deeply into the pose, now I have to have something to keep me from falling over backwards in that pose. So what do? I take my foot, shift it to the back, and now as I come into this pose, again, shoulders in front of the knee, thumb may come down to the foot as the hips lift up, and I begin to twist. That gives you an idea of how whole body turns into that pose. And from the simple practices of working on blocks, you'll slowly develop the strength and balance to get into those other poses very safely.